Is today's project good? Is it dumb? I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Um, I was thinking, I watched Turds and Delhi play Cosmos today, at least the game three of the match, which was the first decisive game. And it made me want to think a little more about closed because I had fun watching it. I don't commentate many closed games, but when I do, I tend to be kind of interested. I think in large part because I haven't spent as much time thinking about it. So it's like, ooh, let's think about this somewhat different thing. And also because some of the principles are a lot less clear. And so then I thought, what can we do to think about this more empirically? And I don't have like the programming to set a program to play itself over and over and get a lot of data quickly and efficiently, but I can do some of that work myself. And that's what I thought I'd do. I thought I'd play a game. I'd pick a starter in five. We're going to be thinking about starters in five. This to me seems reasonable for this hand, right? The 7 8 8 4 can play off two of the numbers. I didn't think too much about it, but it seems like if you're going to chuck a card in five, this seems a perfectly reasonable card to chuck in five for the first turn player. And then I would sort of play out all the plausible games and see what lessons we can learn from it. And I think this is going to be prone to a few things. For instance, it would be easy to read too far into the results we get in narrow samples, right? Like, you don't want to take one game, have a move not work, and be like, well, that doesn't work ever. So I think we need to be careful about that. But I also thought, like, and also you might conclude something like, you know, oh, meeting it with corners is really good because maybe all the corners we could play are corners for, let's say, nine. But maybe the opponent's hand is just really bad at going against corners for nine. So we happen to, whenever we played a corner, it was always in nine because our hand happened to facilitate that, and their hand happened to suck against it. So you really want to do these tests with lots of hands. But we're just getting started on this. I don't know how far I'll go with it. I'm really curious if anyone has thoughts or finds this interesting. But we're basically going to be playing out, not entirely today. We're going to be playing out a very small chunk today, maybe about a 30th of the possible stuff to do on this game, and just see if we can pick anything up from it. So I first came up with all the kind of plausible replies to the starters. I cut some because I didn't want too many redundant stuff of types. But what I wanted to do was identify moves that were different types of replies. So just to give the replies to the starter I came up with, and I'm sure you're going to go, why didn't you do this one? It's way better than all of those. It probably is. What can I say? Um, these were the ones I came up with, not trying to spend a long time on this project and trying to come up with ones that fit specific categories. So if your move doesn't fit one of these categories, I'm probably going to miss it. One thing is corners, strong synergy corners. What's the strongest corner I can play that sets up some synergy? The highest one I came up with was here, which sets up 8 7 8 6 and 2. I didn't see a good corner to set up both sides at once in a way that was nice combo wise. Maybe you do spot it. I didn't when looking at this. You know, sometimes you don't have it. This was the closest I came to a strong corner with good synergy. The closest I came to a weaker corner with good synergy is A4, 8, 6, and 1, setting up 8, 7, 8, 6 for 4. And we have lots of potential captures in 2 if needed, with high-ish or low numbers outfacing. Our hand is weak to the right, so you can't have higher outfacing in 2 than we have as possible after this while recapturing. I also decided to include a bluff corner, right? A corner that does set up a really nice synergy for us in 4. And odds are the opponent's not going to play in 4 next turn, so we're not going to be forced to show we don't have 8. Maybe we can find a way to play around it later. Maybe this is not so risky. I wanted to include some bluffs. I think it is worth trying to do an empirical look at what moves are good, worth considering are bluffs good, and also when and where should you bluff, right? And one thought that came to me, and I haven't justified this or anything, but say you get a slash position, right? Or say you're playing into a slash. I think this is a very risky bluff because it is really frequent for players to play in the side squares in the slash position, and if you don't have the recapture in 2, this is a common square for them to play. But I think this bluff on turn 2 rather than turn 3 is a much more sensible bluff because the opponent almost never takes it immediately. You got to know your opponent a little. If you're playing a very new player, they're likely to capture at all times. But they almost never take this immediately, and maybe there's room to play around after. Now, maybe you're still in trouble after, but maybe there's room to play around it. And so I do want to get into when and where to bluff. I think that might be something this is nice at figuring out. Then I got into sides. First, I had 2 picks for weak sides. There are lots of options for weak sides. Weak side meaning it is weak to 5, which means if you can potentially combo later through 5, you can potentially get value off this. I thought the weak sides, for instance, one of the ones I did was here in 4. This is both weak to 5, but also works nicely with 8, 7, 8, 6, right? We have nice ways to recapture it if needed. And the other one I did was 9, 3, 7, 9, and 2, which we also have pleasant ways to recapture with 8, 7, 8, 6, but potentially other cards as well. Though this one I'm personally more skeptical of because A4, 8, 6, and 2 is our only combo play against their starter, so maybe something like this makes more sense, Irvine and 8, but that would be a bluff, right? We don't have captures there. So I ended up with those as my 2 examples of weak sides, meaning weak to 5. Incidentally, this tends to be one strong players quite like. Then there is matching it, right? If you have the same number facing 5 from the side, you cut off the combo chain immediately, and you potentially reduce endgame risk. Lots of very strong players like doing this. But I think there is an important difference. Capturing the card in 5 versus not capturing the card in 5. And I also put this as a way to do it, where again, we have nice recaptures with 8, 7, 8, 6. So those were the examples I came up with for that. And then finally, there is strong sides. Strong, in this case, meaning strong to 5, meaning moves that overpower the card in 5. I tend to be very skeptical of this. I think most good players tend not to do this. I did this, strong capture with a high number facing out. And note, there is some connection to our hand. 8, 7, 8, 6 has 3. Did my sleep warning just come on? Yeah, it did. 8, 7, 8, 6 has 3, and 9, 3, 7, 9, not as cleanly, has potential in 9. You also have a backup capture in 9. So there is some synergy there, but very high numbers out facing that potentially could give you combo trouble later. And finally, the move we're going to talk about today, A4, 5, 9, and 8, overpowering it, but with low stuff facing out that is somewhat less likely to be comboed. But you'll notice, of course, there is the combo here in 9. And now at this point, and this is the only move we're going to be looking at seriously today, we're going to play out what some closed games might look like and all the variations within them. So I came up with 3 moves I thought were natural closed moves to make for red. And in fact, we will only be considering one of these moves today because it turns out it takes a while to go through this. I don't have a good way to automate it, and it's a slow process. We'll see what we can pick up. Today we're going to be looking at 6, 7, 5, A, and 1. There are lots of moves possible here, but the 3 moves I came up with were 6, 7, 5, A, and 1. What I like about this move is you have pretty good control of the near corner. Gabranth, 3, 7, 9, 9, has good control over 7, so it's hard for someone to play safely in the near corner, and this is a card with low numbers facing out that our opponent is unlikely to get serious combo potential against us, that we actually will see in one line them being able to combo off this in a way that's annoying for the first turn player. It's also a card that just doesn't seem all that useful for the rest of the game. It doesn't have any unique captures in our hand. It is a side-to-side card when the game is up-down. I should note, if we check the solver in this position, it will say we are now losing. Now, this is closed, and first turn, I think, will win a majority of games from this position. Right? I think this is a first turn favored position in closed, even if it is losing in open, because our opponent does not know the exact places that we're weak to, and we will see lots of lines that are effectively losing if it was open, but in fact give very good winning chances for one player or the other in closed. So even though we can see the cards, we're trying to evaluate as if we can't, and we're trying to learn from that, playing out a bunch of games and seeing what differences they make. And this might be something where our sample is too small and we draw way too strong conclusions, but I thought it might be an interesting project. The other 2 moves I came up with here that we will not be considering today are 6, 7, 5A, and 2, going for the line. Again, this seems like the card we want out of our hand, and this is one that we have recaptures on while putting out a high number and keeping what I think are the better cards for later in the game. And finally, a 3, 7, 9, 9 for 3. I don't like this kind of move. I do not like really high corners here because it allows our opponent to slide around it more easily. But this does set up our 6, 7, 5A really nicely against 3, but not so nicely against 9. And anyway, this is not a move I would make, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And part of this testing is to find places where I under or overvalue certain move types. So anyways, we're going to be looking at 6, 7, 5A in 1, and from now on, we will be looking at many a variation within this, rather than just mentioning alternatives and then not exploring them at all. So I came up with 3 main moves to look at for blue here. And I suspect you would come up, whoever you are, with a bunch of moves I did not. Often there are moves in. Basically, no one ever plays 6. So I think actually, if we check the solver here, yeah, there is a win in 6. But obviously, this is not happening in a closed game. This is nothing to do with how the actual game is going to be played. People do play in all the other squares. I didn't pick a move for 3 because I didn't feel like looking there, and because it is definitely the least played of the other 3 squares. People tend to play in 4 if they can slide, right? If they can say, if you capture this from 7, I can combo back through 2. But the only card that you could put in 4 that is weak to 1 is Irvine, and that is also the card you would need to combo back from 2. So I didn't put in a move for 4 here. I didn't think there was one that seemed very logical that would get played in an actual game. Similarly, there are lots of players that really like going in 2 here, and I think 2 is a good square in general here. But on this one, it feels like if you go 2, you're either saying I have very weak numbers out facing, which maybe is worth checking, or a 7 or a 6 out facing, and those are 2 of the most comboable numbers. Probably, and like also, if you want to flip something, you need this weak being weak to 5, and then you're even weaker on the combo chain. So actually, I think maybe the best move in 2 is like A4, 8-6 or 8-7, 8-6 there. But yeah, maybe 8-7, 8-6 is fine. I didn't feel like exploring this. Maybe I should have. The moves I came up with here are highest number facing out in 7, highest number facing out in 9, so 8-4, 8-6, and 7 and 9, and very low number facing out in 9. I think this is done sometimes, and it kind of says to the opponent, if you want to go in 6, you have to take on combo risk that I might be able to hit whatever you play hard. And here there are some situations where that would happen. So those are the 3 moves I came up with. Again, you probably are looking at this and going, those are ridiculous. Obviously, I would play like 9-3-7-9 in one of those squares. I thought the principle of like put the highest out facing is an easy thing to be consistent on. Here it happens that one of the A's is covered while the 9 would never be, but you don't have that information, so I thought may as well be consistent on it. So 8-4, 8-6, and 7 was the first move I've looked at. I've called this the MC corner. We haven't seen MC play in a while, but he was playing a bunch of closed trade, and I think doing very well at the very start of the return. And this was a move type he played a lot of. Now, I came up with 2 candidate moves for our first turn player. One is to take the combo in 9, locking in 8, and one is to just capture this from 4. Now, if we capture this from 4, I think there are kind of 2 reasonable ways for them to play. They can take the combo. This is the variation where that combo through 1 actually hits 4 by playing Irvine in 2, or I thought they could play their highest number facing out in 9. That one is, of course, very risky, because if that's comboed, you're likely in a lot of trouble. But I think the most likely actual continuation here is something like 7-A-8, 4, and 2, which leads to ties because 7-8, 6-8 is a poor sweeper. Or probably even better is 7-A-8, 4, and 3, which sets up that threat in 6. And if blue blocks 6, they get a tie. If they go for 2, they lose. So I put this as a tie/win. Your mileage may vary. You may think this wins quite a bit in practice. You may think it's always a tie. Everyone will block 6 here. I do think blocking 6 is kind of scary because the player can definitely recapture 3. So you're saying if they take an 8, you just lose on the spot. Um, Now, they did just use a card that couldn't take an 8. If they had just used a card that could take an 8, they very likely have another. Here they don't. Your mileage may vary on how often you think this wins this position. It definitely wins it more than this move does. So 7, 8, 4, and 3 I think is the best move. And again, your mileage may vary on how often first turn wins here. I also thought, so I think 9, 3, 7, 9. Wait, what did we just do? Yeah, I think 9, 3, 7, 9, and 9 is not the best try. Seems like it's Irvine here. And now it depends a lot. There's sort of two reasonable things. There's, do you take the combo immediately, in which case you happen to lose? Um, or do you hold off taking the combo, which you may notice is actually a loss if they play Seymour in 9. But I think it's really hard to play Seymour in 9. And I think in practice, it's much more likely to have the game end something like this with a win. So I listed this position as unclear, but I think this shows that quite often, if you have the combo in one corner and you have a capture in the other, you probably take the capture in the other first, just because it's really hard for them to block this, especially with weak numbers facing out from 5, right? 9, 3, 7, 9 here happens to win, but it's like you can't like assume they can't take 5 here, so it's really playing for a tie. And if they can combo 5 or combo 9 or just take both 5 and 9, any of those permutations win. It's very rare for this to be a loss for first turn and very frequent for it to be a win. So I think it's a really hard type of position to hold. And one thing here is probably take the non-combo and leave open the threat of the combo in the other corner. And if they have the commitment to block it, good for them. But even then, you win quite a bit. Um, so I feel like I should be drawing some conclusions here, but we're going to hold off on that for a little bit. But I will note here, as much as I think after this move, first turn is likely to win. A4, 8, 6, and 7, even when they could take it, is not like second turn is dead. They actually have winning chances in our main line, and they have tying chances in some other line. The MC corner, even when they can capture it, you're not dead. And if they don't capture it, you might be in really promising position. They also have this move here. Again, Red's cards are kind of perfect at meeting this. And here there's a couple things. There's of course, sorry, just lost my place. Yeah, so you could go 4, but they don't have a recapture in 4, so it seems kind of terrible to go 4. Again, blue's cards are kind of terrible for this, and red's cards line up perfectly to have the plus walls and same walls. And even then, we're headed to tie town. Almost certainly gonna block 4 here with something not weak to 3, and this is actually a tie. Now, blue kind of needed the numbers to come exactly right, but the numbers were coming really good for red earlier, and blue still had tying chances here. So while I think this whole thing, despite this position being technically lost for red, I think the MC corner play is actually pretty promising, even though the numbers just worked out really poorly in general for blue. There are a bunch of ties down these lines. But this is also to say, I think this position is red favored in a close game. You may look at this and be like, well, if blue's winning an open, blue is probably winning overall or should be considered ahead. I do not consider this the case. In a close game, I would rather have red here. And so I think blue getting some decent results out of the MC corner. Then there's the far corner. This one is not covered, so you'd certainly think it would do better for red. And I think you'd certainly think it would do better for blue. And I think that turns out to be wrong. I think it's actually more dangerous for blue if red does what they should do. I came up with 2 moves for red. One is to go for a Z, right? They don't really have a Q option. And the other is to go in 7, grabbing the card in 8. We're going to look at that one first. I think this one ends up being pretty bad. because they can combo us to hell, and almost certainly will, because even if we combo back, it doesn't flip back 7 or 8. And it turns out red basically just does nothing here. So this is pretty over. Even if they don't take the combo, though, and they go in 6, um, oops, I got my notes wrong. Uh, like, something like this is still actually not getting a great result. Um, yeah, something like that. So I don't know. I think I think this move in 7 tends to be poor, and it is better to go for. Though actually, I play in 7 a lot more than most people do. But here with these cards, it doesn't make much sense to me. I like this move in 2. You keep 2 pretty good sweepers, and while I believe again this position is technically losing, yep, you can see green, meaning oops, meaning second turn has some wins here, uh, multiple wins here. I think in practice, red actually does really well, and the lines I played out of kind of what looks logical here are, for instance, 2, 6, 9A, and 3 going for the capture. And even though we have nothing after this, and even though blue is technically winning, if they play in 7, I think in practice it's hard to say what happens here because like it's pretty tempting to do something like this, and this actually loses. Um, but it is also very tempting to go here because this can't lose. So I think most good players would end up playing here, and I think second turn would end up winning here if they start with Irvine in 3. But would they start with Irvine in 3? Seems just as logical to start in 7, and Irvine in 3, if you get comboed, you might be in huge trouble on the spot. This is a much safer feeling way to start, I think, in some ways. Again, I'm sort of speeding through, so you may think a little harder than I am and disagree. But this is a pretty natural way to start, trying to maybe lock in the card in 8. And both moves are kind of committed to the red player not having 6, which they still could have. You can go for the Z or the S, in this case the Z, when you do have 6. So, not super clear. Um, and if this happens, I've lost my place again. Uh, Almost certainly, I think going here, keeping your better sweeper, and 3799 is a pretty good sweeper here, and you're going to win or tie depending on what the opponent does. Now, of course, this position is technically losing, but again, I don't think they're going to combine with Irvine in 3. I think you're more likely to actually win this comboing here, but maybe most likely to just tie, because I think most good players will just grab the tie here. So I think that one's likely to be a tie. And then there's I looked at 9, 3, 7, 9, and 6, but this just probably going to end up losing to this. You could also play this way, but then you're really susceptible to combos back. I know we can see the cards and know we're comboed back, but I think you play 3799 here and keep your better sweeper. And it probably wins here, though it doesn't if your opponent knows your actual hand. If they don't, I think it's kind of hard not to make this move. So okay, I guess this position was like fine for blue, and they were winning in a bunch of lines. But I think in practice, I know it's winning for blue. I think red is getting at least as good results as blue is here, uh, just because blue can't know that if they combine 9 up and 9 down, they win. And most people sequence this, playing like 3 and then 4, or playing 9 and then 6, and none of those sequences work for the win. All the wins are sequencing 3 and 9, and that's fairly rare way to play this. And 4 and 6 sequence just doesn't work. So I think this is still fairly promising for red. Your mileage may vary. And then the last move I wanted to check was 269A in 9. Now here, this is probably a worse move than it would be in other situations because you have no combo play against any of the captures in 6, even though you actually have quite decent combo play against 6. You can hit A's, you can hit 9s, you can hit 8s, you can hit 6s, right? You can hit 6s multiple ways, you can hit 8s multiple, no you can't. But you can hit a lot of numbers. You just happen to not be able to hit 7s, and the number they have facing out is a 7. Suffice it to say, not really skipping through this, but if they go 7, 8, 4, and 6, they will win in all variations. Um, and here, I think it is not very hard to find this move because 3799 is such a big setup. I don't think this is, I'm finding this because it's open. I'm finding this because it's just a big closed setup that any good player is going to make. Um, so this basically wins on the spot. I think there's nothing. I think it wins in actuality, right? We can see it wins in actuality. All replies are losing, but that doesn't always mean it's losing in close. But I think if you look at the lines, it is just winning here. Um, this one is also just gonna win. There's some slightly trickier lines. There's an option to slide here in 4 with the ability to combo back in 2, but the numbers just don't work out, and you end up losing anyway. Um, yeah, so both moves in 6 just win. The move in 2, going for that Z again, is a little more varied, and the move in 7 is an absolute disaster. But the move in 2, there's a little more play both ways. There's a bunch of lines that ends up winning, like if they take the combo, we get this funny plus, and it all works out great. Okay, that's a little arbitrary. But the move in 2 has pretty good winning chances, but moves in 6 definitely look better. And if we can take one thing from this, it's probably that the Q is a little preferable to the Z. Which again, it's a sample of like one line from one game. Um, but I think Q over Z, barring any other factors, is probably right. It's probably a little better. Anyways, that's what today's results suggest. What other lessons can we take? Um, Playing strong out in 7 or 9. Obviously, the ideal is if they can't take, so whichever one they can't take is going to end up playing out better. But I would note if you go in 9 and they can take, we have the Q, which is difficult for us. If we're thinking from second turn perspective. But even if they can't take, if they go in 2, 7 not so good, but possible. If they go in 2, they potentially can still give us huge problems. While if we go here, I think we're probably pretty happy. Like, okay, here they happen to have this combo potential in 9, but even then, Blue had a chance to hold and did hold in the line we looked at. Um, but if 4 is played, even if they have 4, there can be some chances, and if they don't have 4, we have very real chances. So I guess I think like we look at these moves in 7 and 9, and you see it in open, and you go, oh, of course 9 is better than 7, and like of course 9 is better than 7. But in a closed setting, at least with these hands, even though red is really lined up against 7, our chances playing this move, I think we're only slightly better. I think this is a pretty automatic reply, and we really have to sequence this well to do all right. And I don't know that we have like the information to do that sequence. We don't know their opponent is just dead to 9s facing up and down. So I think one thing to say here is maybe we're underrating the MC corner, because even in this situation where they were lined up really well against it, it didn't perform that much worse than going in 9, which our opponent wasn't lined up well against at all. And so imagine if this was the one they weren't lined up against and this they were lined up well against, I think this would be dead in the same way this is dead, right? While this would in fact be in great shape. So I guess my argument is real upside to the MC corner. And yeah, that's my most interesting takeaway, I think. The other thing is first turn is really often losing in positions I think are promising for first turn. Like, if you could see the cards, first turn would be losing here, but you can't see the cards, and first turn is the one that's going to benefit because second turn has to dodge a lot of very specific things, and in an open format they can, but in a closed format they cannot. And that's obviously difficult. So not sure there are big takeaways here. Let me know if you want me to continue this project. I'm kind of interested in it. I think it would be neat to kind of build up a sample of looking through moves and think about stuff, see where my instincts are right and where they're wrong. Also, any conclusion, like the MC corner is good, or did we have any other big conclusions here? Qs are a little better than Zs. All of it should be taken as like this was a one game sample of that being true with very specific cards and setups. I think the argument for the MC corner being good is a little stronger because the cards lined up so badly for it, and it still didn't perform that much worse than a move that the cards lined up really well for. And that strikes me as, you know, how to say this for the non-statistically minded. You learn when you go into like statistical stuff very early, or like just thinking about things in life. Like small samples aren't that indicative. You see the kid kick the soccer ball, accurately once. That's one kick. They so easily could have gotten lucky. On the other hand, if you're doing a contest of who can kick a soccer ball the farthest, and say most people are kicking it, I have no idea how far people can kick a soccer ball, but say most people are kicking it, I'm saying random numbers, 100 feet, and one guy kicks it 230 feet, right? Yes, it's a sample of one, but also it's so far out of the range of what other people are doing. Like, if everyone else is kicking it 100 feet, then the range can't be that big on what normal kids are kicking. And the kid who kicks it 230 feet, even with no other evidence, you can reasonably conclude is much better than probably all of these kids, probably by a huge margin, right? When we have an extraordinary result, or one that really says, even with a wide range applied to this is far ahead of the rest of stuff, you can draw strong conclusions from small samples, right? When the result is extraordinary, either because it's something that could not have been moved much, so really is that distant from the field, or because it is so difficult to like imagine anyone in the field randomly getting that kind of result, right? Like if you start a sport of something and someone starts 15 and 0, like that's really hard to have just it's really hard for them to be a 50% team. A 50% team is incredibly unlikely to go 15 and 0. Now, if you have 1,000 seasons of a sport's history, at some point a 50% team is going to go on a 15-win streak. Probably. I haven't done the math. But if it just happens in like the first 15 games, if you have someone like Doc Evil who wins his first 15 tournament games, there is no chance he's like a true 50% player getting lucky. There is like no chance he's a true 70% player getting lucky. To have results that extraordinary that basically just haven't been replicated, or like only a very few have replicated and taking it a lot more tries, you can have a result that's extraordinary enough that you don't need a huge sample. You'd need a big sample to know exactly what it means, but you don't need a big sample to know this is at least very, very, very good. And so I guess my argument here is it looks to me like A4, 8, 6, and 7 should be way worse than A4, 8, 6, and 9. And skimming the lines, it seems to me that practically it doesn't look that much worse to me. It's worse, but it doesn't look that much worse to me. That seems an extraordinary result, so one we should take kind of seriously. The difference between Q's and Z's here seems to me like, well, you just happen to have this 7 facing out that they can't capture. It's more telling to me that 3, 7, 9, 9, and 6, well, maybe not technically a win. Yeah, there is a tie. I think in practice is always going to be a win. And this is a less extraordinary move. I mean, this is a less like, this move says like, sorry, not that move. This move says, okay, they happen not to be able to take this in a good way, they're dead. This move says they're almost never going to be able to take it in a good way, and that they're still dead here is really encouraging and suggests something stronger about Q's being better than Z's here. But another thing about the Q being better than the Z is whether the opponent has play against 5. And one thing interesting about 3, 7, 9, 9, and 6 being better than 7, 8, 6, 8, and 2 is, well, there are a few things here, but one is this move actually gives blue more combo potential because they have the same wall here and they have the plus wall here. The better move is actually the one that leaves open more combo squares for them. But this is sort of ameliorated by the fact that 7-8-6-8 is so dominant at sweeping the top row. For instance, a move like this would be really promising if it wasn't just destroyed on the spot, and then had this immediately also destroyed on the spot by just huge combos. So your mileage may vary, but I think from this, and again, we should not take the conclusions that strongly, but the more extraordinary you think they are, the more you should take them seriously despite the small sample. Probably nothing here all that extraordinary though, but maybe you're convinced. Um, I think the arguments here are that the first turn player should prefer the Q to the Z, and that the second turn player should prefer the MC corner to the far corner. And we could see if that holds up. Actually, we can go a little further on this video. I'm not going to do this as strenuously, but we considered this move, or I mentioned this move. I thought this was a possible move, and this gives up play against the corner in 7, right? This was the capture card against 7, but actually keeps play against 9, because 6, 7, 8, 5 can play against 9. So, what happens here? Well, actually, now it's going to depend on what cards are kept, right? And like the exact sequencing here is going to make a big difference. Like this, I think is very likely to get a tie. But you could also, if you taking the risk, there's no point. So this is really likely to end up as a tie. This way is also very likely to end up as a tie. However, something like this, I think you have to play here, is going to lose, while this one is almost certainly going to win. Because they really don't have a good play. Yeah, this is just going to win. Now, it turns out they could tie, but I think you have to play it this way and lose. But this is to say, depending how they play it and how the exact cards play out, but this position's kind of promising. And if we compare that to playing safely in the far corner, and let's say they go for the S or Z, what's likely to happen here? Well, there's a lot of combo potential in 6, which is why I hate these strong corners, because it's so easy to give your opponent combo potential. So this landing at some point is going to be kind of devastating. So I wonder, on the other hand, there's the combo back potential. So maybe they're doing fine here. What would get played in practice here? All right, let's say they take the combo immediately. That's definitely going to be hit back, right? Unless there's some win here, but that doesn't win. So I think they're going to combo back. And then you're just dead. You have no captures. So you can't start that way. You have to play over on the left first, because the left is dead for you, and then take the combo. And then you're just going to lose to the combo in 9. So I think in practice, this is still probably just a win for first turn, even though second turn would have defenses if they knew the cards. I think in practice, probably a win. So again, I think even though the card in 7 is safe, you're really often losing this in a closed game. Now, of course, you have this right weakness. There's other things going on, but isn't that interesting that this time I think clearly the MC corner, it performs better, even though it's the one capturable, right? So we've now had 2 cases. In the last one, it performed slightly worse, and it was the capturable one. This time, it's the better performer, and it's the capturable one. So both times it's gotten kind of unlucky. Now, of course, it's going to be captured more often because it interacts with more things, right? Playing here they can interact pluses with the card in 5 if we go in 7. Can you see when I hover over? One sec. Yeah, you can. Okay, cool. Just making sure. I can't see what I'm recording, so anyway. So what was I saying? Yeah, so now if you go in 7, stuff can interact with you via the wall in the side of 4 and the card in 5. If you go here, there's a wall interaction, the card in 5, and that card put in 3. So there's more interactions and they can take more often, but it's not necessarily that much more often. We've just happened to have, very specific examples. And it's still performing between the 2 ones we've looked at. It has averaged performing better. Then I guess the other question I wanted to look at was, we don't have a good example because all these moves are kind of safe. Um, but actually, maybe that's worth checking. Like, say you play here, and we go for this again. Is this any better than last time? No, it's about the same. Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a real argument for the MC corner out of this, and there's not any of the cues we can test. Something we didn't look at last time was cards in two. Um, and here that makes a lot of sense, right? Going in, what I call this the T square because it allows a T, right? I think of this is the Z square because it allows a Z. This is the T square because it allows a T. Both of them can go into S's or Z's, right? If you go in 7 and they go 2, or you go 2, they go 7, but they're each allowing one different formation. This allows a Q, this allows a T. So I think of them in terms of that. I think of this is the sliding square. It says, hopefully I can combo back from 2. And here we do have a way to combo back, so we should actually consider both this and this here. No longer working from notes, but I might be better when not working from notes because I'm actually thinking about the position. So this is definitely worth considering, right? If they go for the capture, we now have a really nice combo back. And I guess they have this nice move. And because we have no right power at all, and because I wasn't thinking about that, this is still losing. Um, so maybe you don't start in 9. Maybe you start like here. And you get unlucky that you happen to walk into a bazillion combos, but that's kind of just unlucky. Um, yeah, the fact that this position is losing when you have 6 seems to me really unlucky, but you know, again, your mileage might vary. One thing I think is really actually probably a better move here for red is to go in 6, because if you have combo play against the cards in all the other squares, then even if they can take this, you can combo back, and if they can't take this, that's pretty good too. So you can easily imagine something like, and you've locked in the card in 3, which is nice. So you can easily imagine something like this, and then even playing here, you know, they have to have some courage to block 1. Now here blocking 1 wins, but if they don't block 1, they lose. You can also take the combo immediately, but of course this is highly susceptible to getting comboed back. And on average, I think you want to play, as I said earlier, that's a third conclusion. You want to play leaving the combo corner open. If your combo square is 4, you probably take it immediately because that's less obvious to combo back, right? If that flips 6, anything going through 2 or 8 is not going to flip 6 back. But if your combo square is 1 or 7, you usually want to play in the opposite first and leave your big threat open. Keep your better sweeper. And if they do block the square, you can lose here. But also, you often play this way when you just have a really nice final card, and then doing this just walks into losing for nothing because you can take 5, and, if you can take 5 here, they have no chance to win with this. While going in 4, at least they can have some hopes to win. So yeah, I do think even though this technically loses here, it is the way to play it. And I think this move in 6 can be an appealing option as well against these moves in 2. Though here, allegedly not working so well, but this is so close to dominating the end, right? Like, what's the one number facing left from 5 this can't take, and thus you have losing chances? A 9, right? Very exactly not working out well. So yeah, moves in 2 are interesting. I don't know if I have a huge conclusion there. It is interesting that this is winning here. I tend to think T's are better than Q's and are better than S's and Z's. And this winning, even though the opponent has such good combo play, is really promising. But also, our combos back are just insanely lucky, right? Like, that this one we can take with our 6-7-5A, leaving open our 7-A-8-4, which also has their hand totally under control, is not something we planned for or could have known. There's also, of course, this move in 6, with the point that if you take it, they hit you really hard with combos back. So you actually you can't really take this because this is also murdered by combos, and they're saying I have the combo, and you really have to believe them. So if you want to go there, you kind of have to go this way. And they're gonna have a problem that they ran out of right power. Again, we usually want to play our worst card first. Which I guess means I'd probably play this here and then I'd lose. But, you know, what can you do? I guess everything loses here. Yeah, so this works out pretty poorly for us. Could we block two? You know, even if they have the combo here, which they happen not to, we still have three. But we also now have a huge threat to go in nine, so they almost certainly have to play something to block nine. Let's say this. It's probably not the best card. And now we can do something like this, where we keep a better sweeper, right? This hits sevens and eights. This just hits nines. There's some argument either way. Knowing the cards, obviously, this is the better move. But also, we could play this way, where we hit anything 8 and below facing up. Um, and the exact cards mean some of this works and some of this doesn't. But this is actually, I think, an easier position to play than this one because we have kept a worse card right in this line. We have kept both our side-to-side cards instead of our slightly more up-down card. And also, if we play it this way, we've at least locked in, we at least have the option to lock in here in a way that they can't combo back extra cards. Well, if we're flipping stuff we don't control the out-facing, we're not going to be able to do so cleanly. Okay, I'm probably just saying muddled muck, but I would say my four takeaways. I think I can come up with four takeaways. One, I do not love playing strong corners in these J's because they give our opponent a lot of ability to slide, and I think sliding in 2 or 4 is a very appealing way for them to play. And the lower the numbers we play, the less they have a chance to do that. But if you play an opponent that you notice does not slide, then playing strong corners might be a really nice way to play against them. But the more your opponent looks to slide when they see strong corners, they go, okay, that is 2 out-facing numbers. I have combos on one side. I'm going to play a card on the other side, and I'm ready to combo back. This can be a really difficult thing. I think this is a better move in 1 than this is in 3. And I think if you're the second turn player, sliding can be a really powerful thing to do and won us a bunch of lines. Second turn does win in a bunch of those lines if you play them out. Even if first turn has a chance and first turn's a little unlucky, the numbers work out bad. Second also has no right power and is just failing to capture lots of things and is still winning in a lot of those lines. So, there's always going to be caveats both ways. So take one is out of these kind of positions where you're angling for a J, weak numbers facing out are usually preferable. And on the second turn, if you can, sliding is a powerful strategy. Sliding meaning play next to a strong corner with weak stuff facing out, such that either they have to lock, just to put the example on board, right? If they try to lock in 6, well, then you get 9 for free, and maybe you lock in 6, or you can get 1 locking in 2. And if they play in 1, you can always combo back via 6. Here it happens not to work, but that is just incredibly unlucky from second turn's perspective. So sliding is good, and allowing sliding is poor, and the higher numbers you face out, the easier it is for them to slide, both because those are numbers that are more often going to be comboed rather than overpowered, and because those high numbers are easier to slide next to. A lot more numbers are lower than them, so it is easier to slide. So thinking in terms of J's, I think first turn does not want to allow sliding, and second turn should be excited to slide. My other conclusion here is I think the MC corner is better than the far corner, and I think it is significantly less frequent. And by better, I mean we have 2 data points that suggest it's better, and it's something I've been sneakily high on for a while, so I'm inclined to jump to a too strong conclusion It may be completely wrong, but I think these were interesting examples of two different situations where the MC corner performed better, even though it seems like it should be worse because both times it was covered and neither time was the far corner covered. Now, it wasn't better in both examples, but net across both, I think it averaged a little better. And that's a kind of remarkable achievement for a move that was covered both times. So imagine if it wasn't covered every time. It would outperform by a lot potentially. I think also notice the MC corner got better the higher a corner they had played in three, because it was more likely that we would be able to set up combo chains that they couldn't play in six, both taking and being safe to the card in three. So once again, playing these big corners in the J doesn't mean no big corners ever, but it means I think big corners in the J are something. Okay, again, not a ton of evidence we should be suspicious of. So what do we have? We have no big corners in the J, look to slide, MC corner is good, and then probably the ranking of the three structures is something like TQZ, but all structures have some promise for first turn if you have good cards to sweep. All three of those structures. The way they pair cards is quite powerful. I think out of all those structures, second turn's best chance to hold tends to be to slide, right? To slide in one of the side squares and be ready to combo in the other. And the reason I don't like the T for second turn is I think it is the hardest to get that to work, right? I think the sliding strategy is least effective out of the T, which is why I like to allow at least. But like you look at Seto play closed, he plays a lot, allows a lot more T's than I do, and Seto is a better closed player than I am. So again, feel free to completely write this off. Um, you should figure out which formations you want to allow and which you don't. For instance, if you think the Q is the most dangerous, then you, in this say position, you shouldn't play in seven, right? You can still play in two. You can allow the T or the Z. You could play the MC corner in nine. You could play in six, sliding, but you really don't want to play in in seven, because then you get Qs. If you don't like the T, you really don't want to play in two, and you probably don't want to play in one either, right? Those are moves that are really likely to lead to Ts. If you don't like the S or Z, kind of hard to avoid it. You could go one. You could slide in six, but sliding's not always available. Probably want to go for the MC corner if you really hate the S and Z, if you think those are good for first turn. I do think there is probably objective truths to this, but also the margins aren't that big. And if you are better at figuring out some of these formations than others, you understand them better, that's going to make a bigger difference than what is optimal. I'm repeating myself now, but my takeaways for today were: don't play big corners in the J if you're on first turn. Look to slide or to play the MC corner more than people do if you're on second turn. That doesn't mean the far corner is wrong. The far corner is a fine move. Many good players play it more than any other move. I'm just suggesting we might be underrating some of the alternatives, specifically that MC may be ahead of the game. And I think MC, in a structural sense, has generally been ahead of the game. He was capturing corner starters way before most top players were. Um, you know, I think, sad we don't see him playing much. And the little open he did play in the return, it wasn't super impressive. But like he's been super impressive in the past, and he was doing great in closed trade. And I think if he likes a move more than most, it's really worth considering that move. Um, and then formational preference, I kind of think it goes TQZ is the order of preference for first turn, but of course the specific cards make that vary. And I think that's it, but you might have looked at the same data with other stuff. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this because it's really hard to do empirical stuff for closed, and I really don't think anyone's attempted it. Back in the day, Metis did some closed games where he took screenshots and wrote down what he was thinking at different points, and that was really interesting. And that, but like, I've seen very little attempt. Like, people like Turds and Deli obviously have interesting thoughts about closed and strategy and closed, but there's been very little put out publicly or tried to be organized. This was a very unorganized video, but I really tried to say, what is something I could do where we could try to look at this empirically, could get a bunch of examples, compare stuff. And it's so easy to get tricked by just how these cards happen to exactly work out, right? That blue can never take anything to the right makes a big difference, all that stuff. But and I also tried to play games out as they tend to be played out and closed. But if you think they don't get played out like I'm intuiting, then a lot of this is worthless. And this move in eight, incidentally, this the second move of the game, I think is a pretty unlikely move to be played. So it might just be that a lot of the conclusions we draw there from this aren't that frequent. But there's no way you can look at this kind of J and think that kind of position never happens in close. Like this kind of position happens all the time in close, even if probably from slightly different move orders or things like that. So I think there's lessons to be drawn, but yeah, maybe we'll try to continue this series. But definitely let me know if you have thoughts about it or want to see more of it. I'm interested also in comparing to a move like this because I hate defending the line. I don't mind defending the J, but I hate defending this line. I think it's really, really hard for a second turn to do well. And if looking at it a bit, I can conclude no, second turn is fine here. Here's the strategy. That would be really cool. We're on a fact finding mission. We're trying to use evidence and maybe learn something. And if nothing else, try to look at closed in a way no one has experimented too much with.